Okay, so I'm now starting a new series in which I'll be covering the IAP videos. There's a YouTube channel of IAP, Indian Academy of Pediatrics, and they post really good stuff. But the problem is the videos are so long. They are like almost all the videos are more than 1 hour. Some are even 2 hours. So it's not possible for a lot of people because of timing issues in the residency to watch them. But if you do, they are very helpful. But if you're not able to watch them, I'll be posting the crux of the videos, like the all the slides, and just covering it in a fast manner. Fine. So in this video, I'll be covering the video which was posted on 3rd June and titled as "Learning from Experts," and it is basically it's covering a lot of topics of neurology. So let's start with the first one, that is approach to first seizure episode. So, what is the diagnostic approach to a child who presents to us with a first seizure episode? We will ask about the history, physical examination, blood work as indicated at the toxic screening, and lumbar puncture only if there is evidence of CNS infection. EEG should be done ASAP or within 24 hours. Fine. General examination. We should look for all the neurocutaneous stigmatas. Micro and macrocephaly should be ruled out, and there should be a complete neurological examination. And when are we supposed to do neuroimaging? MRI is the preferred neuroimaging in these children, and emergent imaging only if there is acutely abnormal examination, right? If there is any paralysis, if the child is not waking up, MRI is warranted in most cases. If no other concerning features, then it is not an emergency to do the neuroimaging. 2 to 16% with the new febrile seizure has clinically significant finding. Okay, and when should MRI be considered seriously? Like we should do MRI is if there is any abnormality found on the examination, if there are focal seizures, if there are focal abnormalities on the EEG, or age of the child is less than 1 year. Overall risk factor for the recurrence, like patients uh, parents of the children ask us, will it reoccur, the seizure will reoccur. So what are the risk factors? If there is an abnormal EEG or MRI, then the risk of recurrence increases. If there is a seizure during sleep, then again it increases. If it's symptomatic, underlying neurologic condition is found, then again its recurrence increases. Or there is a family history in the first degree relative, 70 to 80% recurrence if a second seizure occurs, and there is any neurodevelopmental delay. So these all factors are the risk factors for recurrence. No risk factor, would you start anti-seizure medication? So there seems to be a worldwide consensus that is not necessary to prescribe everyday anti-seizure medication treatment to child after a single unprovoked seizure. Decision to treat depends on individual risk benefit. Treatment not indicated to prevent the ultimate epilepsy, potential risk of further seizure, and risk of medication side effect. So we have to weigh the risk benefit ratio and then only start the medication. And usually, after a single episode of unprovoked seizure, anti seizure medications are not started until there are significant finding on the EEG or MRI. Fine. Now, okay, so this is the second topic, infantile tremor syndrome. There was a video shown and of a child and which was tremors. What additional phenotype? We see knuckle pigmentation, beating cry, tongue tremors, and neuroregression. And this condition is called as the infantile tremor syndrome. Infantile tremor syndrome, the most appropriate investigation to do is serum vitamin B12 level, because it is due to deficiency in the B12 levels. And if the B12 levels are normal, then we are supposed to do the homocysteine levels, because B12 is involved in the conversion of homocysteine to methylmalonic acid, right? And on treatment, what we are supposed to do, we have to give injection vitamin B12, zinc, iron, and other vitamin supplementation. Now, the next topic that we are going to read is benign paroxysmal vertigo of childhood, (BPVC). So, the typical onset, it most commonly affects the children between the age of 1 and 5 years. Resolution, it typically resolves by the age 8 to 12. Prevalence, though thought to affect about 2 to 3% of the children. Family history, a strong link exists to a family history of migraines or motion sickness. So there is a strong family history of what migraines or motion sickness in children with the BPVC. This genetic link is the key diagnostic clue. And BPVC is a benign condition linked to migraine, characterized by the sudden brief episodes of vertigo in children. So there are sudden and brief episodes of vertigo in children, and diagnosis relies on the detailed history and exclusion of the other causes. Prognosis is excellent, and the treatment is rarely needed. It subsides on its own, right? Now coming to tics. uh, there was this video shown of this child which was having stereotypical predictable pattern caricature of normal movements, and they can be, this is the definition of tics, right, and they can be jerks or blinks and could be motor or vocal. Usually facial and upper limbs are involved in tics and never the lower limbs. There is a feature of urge and can be suppressible also. They are usually associated with ADHD, learning issues, anxiety, and OCD. Definition of tics: it is a sudden, rapid, recurrent, non-rhythmic motor movements or vocalization. Fine. It is a sudden, it is rapid, and it is recurrent. Recurrent is the most important point word here. It is non-rhythmic. Fine. It can be either motor movement or vocal. So the phenomenology it is divided into two. It can be motor or vocal, and again simple or complex types. These are the medication which can be used for tics. Alpha 2 agonist, it is the first line as it has fewer side effects. Topiramate, used for seizures and headache also, and can cause mental fogging and kidney stones. Dopamine blockers, most common antipsychotic, and risperidone, most effective but more side effects and can cause weight gain and mood changes. And other options are VMAT2 inhibitors, botulinum, and deep brain stimulation. Now talking about the epileptic spasm. It is sudden flexion extension or the mixed flexion extension of the proximal and truncal muscles which lasts for 1 to 2 seconds. May be associated with the regression of milestones, right? This epileptic spasm typically occur in a series, usually on awakening. Identification of a structural cause can allow the consideration of curative epileptic surgery. So, if there is any structural cause, then a curative epilepsy surgery can be done. This is the treatment of West syndrome. There is high dose ACTH administration, which is the preferred therapeutic option compared to the low dose ACTH. And suggested dose is 150 units per meter square per body surface area or 6 units per kg intramuscular once daily for 2 weeks to assess the therapeutic response. High dose prednisolone 4 mg per kg per day is recommended, given for 2 weeks to assess the response. If there is clinical spasm cessation, EEG should be performed to look for the dissolution of hypsarrhythmia, because in West syndrome on EEG, hypsarrhythmia was seen. Vigametrin can be also used if there is tuberous sclerosis, 100 to 150 mg per kg for 3 to 6 months. High dose VPA or TPM or nitrazepam can also be used, and ketogenic diet is preferred. Now coming to the next topic, that is headache. What are the key points that we are supposed to ask in the history? The onset, character, progression, duration, frequency of episodes, aggravating or the relieving factors, its area involved, or if it's migratory, and the nature and intensity of the headache. Fine. Character, it can be dull, intense, or pulsatile. In progression, it can be episodic, constant, or progressive. Fine. Now, on the focus examination, we have to look at the sinus, any dental or the TMJ junctions, like TM junctions, pupil and the fundus, BP, examine for any neurodeficits, signs of the raised ICP, and examination of the DTR is a must. There is something called SNOO, which is headache red flags. So, if there are any systemic symptoms, what to ask for in that: fever, weight loss, night sweats, malignancy, HIV or immunosuppression, then we have to think of infection, malignancy, or vasculitis. If there are neurologic symptoms like weakness, ataxia, these are the symptoms which are associated with headache, right? So if there are weakness, ataxia, diplopia, altered behavior, seizure, sensory loss, then we have to think of brain tumor, stroke, raised ICP, and CNS disease. If there is sudden onset and there is thunderclap headache, peak intensity within 1 minute, then we have to think of subarachnoid hemorrhage, CVST, vascular catastrophe, right? That there is any hemorrhage inside the brain. Onset at unusual age. New headache before 5 year or after 65 year. Then secondary headache until proven otherwise. Right? If there is headache in less than 5 year and more than 65, then mostly it's considered secondary headache until proven otherwise. Okay. if, if there are any pattern change, like there is progressive headache, which is, or there is increasing frequency or severity, a new type of headache, then we have to think of brain tumor, hydrocephalus, and raised ICP. If there are provoked or postural, like there is worse with the coughing, sneezing, straining, or posture change. If the headache worsens, then again we have to think of raised ICP and the Chiari malformations. If there is papilledema, which can present as blurred vision, fundus, and showing papilledema, then we have to think of raised ICP. In pregnancy, new headache or change in the pattern during pregnancy, then we have to think of preeclampsia or CVST. There is cerebral venous sinus thrombosis. And if the phenotype of rare headache, clustered, coughing, exertional, sexual headache, then again we have to think of secondary structural causes. Now, how will we approach a case of headache? Child with a chief complaint of headache, we have to ask the history, physical examination, fundoscopic, and temporomandibular junction examination. Then, if there are signs of secondary headache present, we saw it just right now, right? Snoop. And if the signs are present, then we have to do the further diagnostic workup, including the neuroimaging if warranted. And if there are no secondary signs, secondary headache, signs of secondary headache, then we have to consider primary headache disorder. We have to characteristics of migraine. We have to look for the characteristics of migraine, like the aura, localization, associated symptoms, triggering factors, and if they are present, then we have to consider migraine. And if they are not, then we have to consider TTH or other primary headaches, which are rare in children. This TTH, that is tension type of headache, is rare in children, right? Now, migraine. When will the child fill the criteria for migraine? There should be at least 5 attacks, last for 4 to 72 hours, untreated. 2 to 72 hours for children under 18 years of age. Okay. Any two of the four characteristics for us to consider migraine: unilateral location, commonly bilateral in kids. Migraine is bilateral in kids. Okay, there is a pulsating quality, moderate to severe intensity, and aggravated by the routine activity. So, if the symptoms last for more than 6 months, and there are photophobia and phonophobia also. So, this is the diagnostic criteria for migraine. Which drugs use for abortive treatment and when to start the preventive treatment? So, if more than 6 days of headache per month, if more than 4 days of headache with moderate disability, and if more than 3 days of headache with severe disability. So, first line is obviously NSAID, there is naproxen, and sumatriptans are also used. And which drug can be used for prophylaxis of migraine? Calcium channel blockers like the flunarizine, antidepressants, amitriptyline, antiserotonergics, cyprohepatidine, and anticonvulsants like the topiramate and valproate. Now, this is the learning points regarding the headache. Not all the unilateral headaches are migraine. Pay attention to the distribution of headache. Rising trend of stress headache in children, and I see what the brain knows. So let's look at the different types of headache. This one is migraine. This one is due to hypertension. This one is due to stress. See, tension type, and this one is parental. This one is associated with the sinus. This one is the cluster headache. This one is the exertion, and this is related to the temporomandibular joint. Now this is something else. We are This is the diagnostic algorithm for a weak child, floppy child. So if a floppy child or a weak child present to us, we first need to check the reflexes. If the reflexes are brisk, then the cause is central. And if the reflexes are reduced, then it's neuromuscular disorder. Okay, so if there are reduced or absent reflexes in a floppy child, then it's mostly a neuromuscular disorder. Fine. So it's very important to know this. If in a floppy child the reflexes are brisk, then it's a central cause, and if they are reduced or absent, then it's a neuromuscular cause. If it is neuromuscular, then look at the distribution of the weakness. In proximal, muscle can be affected. If the distal weakness, then the nerve can be affected, and in fluctuating, there can be a neuromuscular junction problem. Then order the basic labs, CK, EMG, and the NCS. That is electromyography and the nerve conduction studies. And then it will guide us to the next steps and confirm with the genetic or the molecular test and biopsy. Now, in suspected neuromuscular disease, what are the core tests for the workup? We have to look for the blood CK, that is creatinine kinase. It's CPK, right? Creatinine kinase, phosphate kinase. Many tests can be conducted in the clinic or ordered with a rapid turnaround time. So we have to consider CK positive if it's more than 5 times the normal, non-specifically elevated in the first week of life. Now coming to the genetic testing, it can be single gene, multi-gene, panel, or whole exome sequence. Commercially sponsored options. EMGs in the NCS, neuropathic changes in the myopathic changes can be seen in the EMG, that is electromyography, and the nerve conduction studies. We can appreciate the neuropathic or the myopathic changes. MRI and biopsy may not be required if positive non-invasive test result. And in ultrasound muscles, we can see the affected regions. Now the last slide of this video is of GBS. So there is ascending motor weakness along with areflexia in the classic form. So there is what? There is more ascending motor weakness and areflexia is seen in GBS. There is a bedside clinical test. There is SLR. So if SLR is positive, then we have to suspect GBS, right? This SLR is nothing but the straight leg test. So when we keep the patient in the supine position and knee in the extended position and we raise the leg, then there is a pain in this knee region. Then the SLR in this, yeah, right. Then the SLR is positive. There is something called as the acroparesthesia. Pain or tingling numbness in the toes and calf muscles precede weakness in 70% of the children. That is known as the acroparesthesia, which is seen in GBS. Right? What is seen? Pain, tingling numbness in the toes and calf muscles, and which precedes the weakness. Which other supportive test can be done? That is NCS, neurocutaneous study. I don't know. Nerve conduction study. There is nerve conduction study in which there will be demyelinating pattern because there is demyelination disorder in GPS. So demyelinating pattern will be seen, and in CSF there will be albuminocytological dissociation in the second week, right? And the diagnosis is GBS. What happens in this albuminocytological dissociation is there is increase in the albumin and no increase in the cells. Usually, if there is any infection or bacterial meningitis and all, both the proteins and the cells increase. But in GBS, there is only inflammation of the nerves, right? There is demyelination of the nerves. So there is no increase in the cells because it's non-infectious, but it precedes, but it not precedes. Um, there is a prior history of gastrointestinal infection before GBS, right? So yeah, in CS albuminocytological dissociation, the albumins are more in CSF in the second week, and the diagnosis is GBS. So this is all about this video. The video on the IAP page is 1 hour 18 minutes long, and we have covered everything in about 20 minutes. Thank you for watching.